Okay, it's 12:05. We'll go ahead and get started. Thank you to everyone who is attending this virtual forum for Partners of Scott County Watersheds. My name is Cassie, and I am the coordinator for Partners of Scott County Watersheds. We're a nonprofit organization whose mission is to improve the stewardship of Scott County watersheds through education, technical guidance, and volunteer opportunities. We are supported by a few municipalities in the area, as well as some other nonprofit organizations and some caring individuals. Our main goals that we have as an organization is to educate the people of Scott County about healthy watersheds and what they can do to improve them. So we do this by having our monthly educational forums like the one you're about to view. And then we also do 3 snapshot water quality monitoring events per year in which volunteers from all different backgrounds and age groups help us out by doing some different water quality tests around 60 sites in Scott County. And we take this data and we add it to our over 20-year database of water quality trends, and we can identify which areas are healthy and which areas might need room for improvement. So I encourage you to visit our website and our Facebook to learn more about what we do. Also, all participants are muted at this time so that Rob can go through his presentation. You are able to ask any questions through the chat, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. Before we get started, though, I'm going to give you a little bit of information about who we are. So we are right now a charity for Birdies for Charity. So if you planned on donating to the John Deere Classic, you can look us up online. Our charity number is 2299. We also have a GoFundMe account for raising money to help put on these forums, as well as to purchase snapshot water quality testing equipment so that we can continue to monitor the trends in Scott County's waterways. We also have a membership and funding partner program, so you can learn more about these benefits and how you can support us by going to our website. The next forum will be Tuesday, June 16th. It will most likely be a virtual forum again because the libraries, the Eastern Avenue Library and Fairmount Library, where we normally host these, will probably not be open by then. So save the date for June 16th, and hopefully by summertime, we'll be back to doing these in-person forums. For those of you that aren't familiar, we normally have them from noon to 1 at the Eastern Avenue Library and 5 to 6 p.m. at the Fairmount Library on the 3rd Tuesday of every month. All right, so now I'll go ahead and get Rob's presentation going. All right, Rob, whenever you're ready.
There we go. There we go. Okay. Welcome. Thanks for inviting me here. We'll get started. This is kind of a new process for me. I'm much better live and in person, I think, than I am on Zoom, but we'll give it a try. Do we have the first slide ready, Cassie?
Yes, you are. You're ready to go.
Is it up? Because
Yep.
It's not. Oh, okay. It's not showing up on mine. So that's why so this might be a little bit complicated because I can't see what we got up there. So we should have messy fields make good neighbors.
Yep.
Okay. Why is mine not coming up? I still have the same dates.
Brian, can you help him out? Or maybe Rob, you just need to refresh your screen.
Oh, well, we're not getting it to work for some reason or another. But okay, I'll do my best. So and you can go to the second slide.
Yep.
Nobody's seen it? Is that what? I don't know. Brian, are you seeing it?
Cassie, I feel like you might need to switch to a different screen. Do you have it on the same screen?
There we go.
I'll try it again.
Okay.
Yeah, because there were a lot of people saying they weren't getting it.
Yeah, I was still on the previous presentation, Cassie.
Hey, there we go. Okay. Excellent. Well, the title of this is thank my wife for this, because she questioned me one day wanting to know why our fields look messy compared to the neighbors, and so and I said because it makes good neighbors, and with our no-till operation, what we'll talk about a little bit later. So you can go to slide 2. It's just reviewing the best farming practices is what we were asked to talk about today, and so we'll talk about you know, who we are. I don't know. It's I don't know. It's not clicking, I guess, Cassie. If you moved it, I still have messy fields. Huh. Are we seeing anything coming? I see Jerry Moore's on. Hi, Jerry.
All right. Can you see that? Can you see that? My mouse.
I can see slide 1. We can. Is it not clicking to enable editing or front?
No, resume slideshow would be fine.
There we go.
Do you see it?
We have one. Can you go to the second one?
I have it on slide 2.
It's not showing up on. I'm not. It's not going. Oh, there we go. Now it went. Okay. So anyways, we're just going to review our the best farming practices that we use on our farm. We can go to the next slide and talk a little bit about who we are. 5th generation on the farm in Iowa. We raise cattle and hogs and corn, soybeans, and alfalfa hay. And 2 boys that are very active on the farm right now, and getting growing up in the culture that I think we all want, learning about conservation and doing environmentally friendly things for the farm. Our goals, we can get down to 4. The goals for today, we're going to try to, I think I'm going to do my best to give a basic science class. And when I mean basic, I mean very basic. And we'll go through nitrogen and phosphorus and the movement of them. And then the importance of organic matter, and then what we're doing to help those issues that we know we have with water quality. And we're not getting any slides here. So the first thing we got to understand about nitrates in the water is how they move. And nitrogen has a great affinity for water, and it wants to leach down through the soil. So the more rain we get, the more water goes to that. We'll grab that nitrogen and want to take it down through the soil, and then eventually into our tiles, and then into our streams. So if we understand that a lot of water makes nitrogen move, that's the main thing there, and then it goes down through the soil. The other is phosphorus is another big issue that we deal with. And if we understand that the phosphorus wants to tie up with soil particles on the surface, and the way we lose the soil we lose the phosphorus into our water is through soil erosion off the surface. And if we can understand those 2 things, that's what we're trying to address in our farm operation right now. So how to keep that material on the soil and not in our water. And then the last thing to understand in basic science class is the organic matter in our soils. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to improve our our organic matter through no-till practices and strip-till practices. We don't want to disturb the soil and release carbon into the air, which would tear down our organic matter. So that when we have higher organic matter levels, it makes the soil a bigger sponge. It has more water holding capability, and it also enhances our microbes in the soil. So we will cover that, and we'll talk about what else we're doing. I'm going to do this. It's kind of like a fat man going through a barbed wire fence. We're going to go as quick as we can. We will hit most of the points along the way, but I want to leave plenty of time for questions at the end because I'm not sure what you all want to learn about. And so we can go to slide 8 maybe. We kind of talked about nitrates and how they move through the soil. This is a slide that shows what we have in our soil naturally. We have nitrogen, we have phosphorus or potash and phosphate in our soil. It may not be available to our plants that we're trying to grow. When we're trying to grow corn and soybeans, it may not be available. We need to figure out how to unlock that, or we need to add some to the soil. That's why you'll see in the springtime we put on a little bit more fertilizer. We put on nitrogen because that is not the stuff that is in the soil is tied up. It's not available to that plant. So that's just what this slide's showing, just basically what we have in Iowa in our soils. And there's stuff to work with that we don't have to put as much fertilizer down. We can through our practices, we can try to enhance microbial activity, which would unlock some of that fertilizer and make it available to the plant. So we can go to our friendly farming practices. The best way I thought to do this would be to start in the fall after harvest, and then we'll go step by step through what we're doing. And feel free to ask those questions to Cassie, and she'll pass them along to me, and I'll try to hit them as we're going along. So first is cover crops, and if we go to number 10, slide 10, there it is. So cover crop basically is we're planting crops after we harvest in the fall, and we'll plant legumes or cereals to germinate in the fall. Some of them will be terminated by frost. Others will come back in the spring. It's not intended to be a crop that we harvest. It is mainly a scavenger crop. So what I mean by that is maybe there's some fertilizer that didn't get used in the fall or through the growing season prior, and we don't want that to leach away, as we talked about the nitrogen, or we don't want it to erode with the soil particles. So what we do is we plant these crops, and they will scavenge up whatever fertilizer is around them through the root system, and they will hold it in their root system, and therefore containing it and keeping it out of our soils. It also is a way to enhance our organic matter. We talked about how we want to increase our organic matter. It's very difficult. It's a long process to increase organic matter. It can be done. And every little bit counts, I think. So if we can, water is our number one nutrient we need for that plant. And in drought years, the higher organic matter, the more water we hold, the better the crops. But also when we plant cover crops, as you can see from this picture, and we can go to the next picture, number 11, that's what it looks like in the fall. That's some cereal rye that we had flown on in the fall before we harvested. And then it started growing up when the corn crop died, and that's what you see there. So it's providing a lot of cover to protect the soil from surface erosion, from water or wind. Slide 12, when we go to that, that's it's a tough picture to take, but that was planted this year, and we had cereal rye in that field, and those lighter patches are what it looks like after we had to terminate it when we planted our corn. Last fall was very trying for us, trying to get cover crops on, because we had a late fall, late harvest. So our cover crops didn't grow quite like we hoped they would. We can go to slide 13. So this is a yield map showing what cover crops do for us, and I don't know if we can enlarge it or not, but that's a 16-acre field. We had planted corn in it, and this was in the year of 2012. And we had chopped, or 2011, we chopped some corn off of it, and then we seeded down cereal rye to cover the ground that fall. 2012, as we know, was a drought year, and we were very late planting our beans on that. But as you can see, the green, there we go. The red is a bad. That's a very low yield. Green is good. We want green on all our yield maps. 2012 was a drought year. We had planted beans in this field. All of the red was planted into, we planted beans into just standing corn stalks. The green area that you see there was silage that we had chopped the year before, and we put cover crop on, cereal rye. And you can see that through a drought year, when I talk about organic matter and holding water and what it does, look at the yield difference. The green is a double the yield as what the red is on that map. And that just shows, and you can see right to where we stopped planting the cover crop. I mean, it's very evident to me that we saw a great advantage with cover crops and increased microbial activity in that soybean field by the yields that we're seeing on that map. So that's one of the advantages of cover crops. We plant about a third to half of our acres in cover crops. It's kind of an expensive practice. It's an annual thing that we have to do every year. And we're looking at a cost per acre of about $12 for the seed. And then you either have an application, aerial application, or you're going to have or we're going to do a ground application and blow it on. And so each one of those has a cost of about $10 an acre. So when you get done, it's about a $25 an acre process to put that cover crop down. I see their benefits through the organic matter and soil retention. But it's a pretty expensive way to tie up those nutrients. We can go to the next would be the strip till application. So in the spring of the year now, when we're ready to plant our corn, we will come in with a strip till bar, which you see right here. What that machine is doing is it is placing our nitrogen, most of our nitrogen, with a nitrogen stabilizer to make sure that we prevent as much leaching as possible. And we will also put in our phosphorus and our potassium and some sulfur, all mixed in, and we put it in a strip going across the field that would be about 4 inches deep. We want to keep that phosphorus down below the surface of the ground. So again, trying to stop the soil erosion and losing our phosphorus off the fields. We will also put, like I said, about 2/3 of our nitrogen need will go in that band, and then potassium and our sulfur. We're starting to see over the course of, just an interesting side note, we're starting to see some sulfur deficiencies in our crops now, because all of the coal plants, which they put the scrubbers on, we're seeing that we don't get as much free sulfur through the rain, through the acid rain. So we are starting to see deficiencies in sulfur, which I think is interesting, right or wrong. You know, it's just it's a fact that we're seeing that now. But going back, the strip till applicator will make strips going across the field every 30 inches. And we do this with GPS. The next slide shows the strips that we're making. We're disturbing about 33% of the surface area there to make a path. It's fun. We can see shirts that say strip till, we're 33% disturbed, which is kind of a little joke for us farmers. And the way we can do this, we can put most of our fertilizer right there where we need it in a band. And then what we're going to do, if you go to the next slide, which allows us, the technology allows us to come back with our planter and plant right on top of that strip, which is really amazing. So that is one of those things that we could not do 20 years ago. So we're able to put the fertilizer at the right time, and we're able to put it in the right place where that plant needs it, and we're able to plant right on top of it. This is just a picture showing what some of our monitors look like. And the blue line is the next line that they would turn to. The white line is the current track, but we can put that seed right over that fertilizer. So we were able to cut our fertilizer usage by about a third to half, because we're not spreading it all throughout the ground on top. We're putting it right where it needs to be. And we've been doing this process now with the strip till machine for 3 years now, and we've seen great benefits environmentally, and we're seeing great benefits in production also. So that kind of helps. We can go to the next slide if you would, please. So now we have this is our soybean planter. So this is a true no-till planter that we will go into our corn stalk residue, and just we haven't done anything different to the soil from in the fall when we combine, and so we come right in and plant. And this just shows the bean planter. We plant on 15-inch rows to try to get an early canopy, and also just it's by getting an early canopy, we're able to use a little bit less herbicide. We don't have to worry about weeds coming later in the season. You can go to the next slide, please. This shows our corn planter, and it is a 16-row planter. So it is the same rows as what the strip till machine is. They're all on 30-inch. And what we're able to do here is we plant right on top of that strip, as I said. And if you look in that lower right picture, you can see some lights on down there. It's kind of an orange or bluish light. That is some of the technology that we're using on our planter. It's measuring organic matter in the soil as we go across the field. It's measuring temperature as we're going across the field where we're planting that seed. And it'll also measure the moisture content at that seed depth. So we kind of have an idea. We kind of have an idea on what the soil conditions are like as we're planting through there. The important thing about measuring the organic matter through that sensor is we are able to do a variable rate application with our seeds going across the field. The higher the organic matter, the more productive it is, the more seeds we want to put in that area. Likewise, if it is a lower organic matter, less productive, we lower the amount of seeds. If we're lowering the amount of seeds, we can also take that to a variable rate application and lower the amount of fertilizer that we're putting on per acre. This does two things. It's going to allow us to save money, which is, I'm a businessman first, so we have to be profitable. And then number two is obviously it's going to be better for the environment because we're putting less fertilizers out there. We can go to the next slide. That just shows no-till plant, the strips going across the field, and what little disturbance there is in that soil. Slide 20, we can go to the next one. This is, had to get a picture of the boys helping load the planter there. And the reason I like this picture, and it's hard to tell because it's such small here, but in the background, that is corn stalks. I mean, and it just looks like we harvested last fall. That's how much residue we're leaving on top of the ground to protect that soil from surface erosion. So that is one of the things that I'm very proud of. And I think it's amazing how the equipment has come a long way that we can plant into this, and the genetics of the beans and the corn to allow us to plant into this type of conditions. We can go to number 21. So now after we have the crops planted, and we talked about in particular with the corn that we put most of the fertilizer down with the strip till machine. Now what we do is, and I have to regress and I apologize, but back in the fall, we would have gone out and we would have sampled the soil, and we're looking for what the nitrogens, what nitrate level there is in the soil as ground zero. And then we plant the crop, and we have our yield expectation of maybe 220 bushels to the acre. We think that this particular farm can produce 220 bushels to the acre given the right conditions and the right fertilizer. So these are kind of different zones that we're sampling on this farm. And then we can go to the next one, the next slide. And so that lower right is showing we do a lot of modeling, and this gets really technical, but basically what we're doing is we're saying, hey, we've had pretty good conditions up until this point. Now we need to decide how much more nitrogen we want to put on this crop, because like I said, we put about 2/3 on with the strip till machine. Now we had to put a little bit on with the spray with our herbicide early on. But this is where the main point comes in is, okay, how much can an honest assessment of how the crop looks health-wise determines, and then through modeling, it will say you've had X amount of water. It might have leached a little bit of our nitrogen away. We need to put a little bit more in certain areas. And that map is showing you where the red isn't calling for a whole lot. It says 1 to 45 pounds, I think. But the pinkish color then is calling for a little bit more. Now what that may be is that's on that particular farm, that's a little bit more productive soil. And it's saying, hey, we can up the yield in this area by putting a little bit heavier nitrogen on. And the green area is a bad area in the field. It might be a sand knob or something, and that's why it's saying, hey, you need to put a little bit more because we might have lost the nitrogen there. This is done with that applicator on the top left. We go in when the corn is about shoulder high, and we will deposit the nitrogen down through that lower left picture. You can see there are hoses coming off of there, and they're running right at the base of that corn plant. And that's where the roots obviously are. We want to make sure that we get the nitrogen right there. So that way, when we have a heavy dew, the water from the dew will run down that plant and run right down come down the stalk. And that moisture, as we talked about earlier, nitrogen likes moisture. So it'll grab onto that and it'll take it down into the root zone and get used right there. This is some new technology that's been around for maybe about the last 7 to 10 years. They call these Y drops, and we've been really impressed with how efficient we can get nitrogen down, and also the fact that we don't have to put as much down because of, again, where we're placing it and when we were placing it. So, all right, we can go. Now we're going to go to kind of the edge of field practices, and I know this is kind of what you wanted me to talk on. We do have fields with terraces in there to control the runoff and surface erosion. And that lower picture that was taken a few years ago with our boys out. So they could get a better understanding of how grass waterways worked and what they were for. We had them out there with little buckets throwing seeds around. And that's how we groom up our waterways, where we would see a lot of water get funneled, and we want to make sure we stop the surface erosion, so we put in grass strips. We also do, we have some buffer strips along creeks on some of our farms. That's in partnership with the NRCS, and they helped us to buy seed and to put that ground into buffer strip to keep the water clean. We also have done some pollinator and wildlife habitat on some of our farms it was less productive ground. It made sense to just put it into a pollinator. My boys would really like to get into bees, so if there's anybody that knows anything about bees, we kind of like to get into that. So now the big thing that we put in, and we can go to the next, is our bioreactors. We built one back in 2017, I believe it was. So I kind of like to use the fancy title and say that I have a denitrification plant. I think that makes me sound a whole lot smarter than I am. But that basically what it is it's taking, it's going to take the tile water, because we have this farm lent itself very well to it. It drains under tile about maybe 65 acres or so. And it takes that tile water down into a big hole. We dig a big hole. You can, maybe the next picture, let's see if I'm going to put my, so yeah, let's go. So here's a great, and y'all probably have seen these before, but bioreactor, dig a big hole, put a whole bunch of wood chips in it. They have to be the right kind of wood chips, because you want to support the microbial activity. And the water from all the tile goes through that. We have a way to say how much water flows in and how much flows out. And then what those microbes do is they attack the nitrates, they break them down. We end up gassing off the nitrogen as a gas comes up through the soil and leaves, and the water comes out on the lower side of that bioreactor into the creek. So it is a lot of upfront cost to this process, but if you look at it, the cost of this bioreactor was a little bit more because due to elevation, and we wanted to make sure that we had to dig a little bit deeper hole. The cost of that was about $12,000. That was a joint effort with the Iowa Pork Producers Association and the IDALS, Iowa Department of Ag Land Stewardship, and ourselves. So everybody had a third of the money in, and I really wanted to do one because we hadn't seen one. It's kind of a new practice in our area. They're very popular up in the Lobe and north central Iowa, but around here you don't see them. But so we thought this farm lent itself to doing this. And when you start doing the math and you say that this bioreactor can clean water for 10 to 15 years before we have to tear it up and put new wood chips in, and you look at how many acres we're taking care of, it's actually a more efficient way economically to clean the water up versus the $25 an acre that we talked about on cover crop. But there's a lot of upfront cost, and I think that's what's that's why we don't see a whole lot of the activity in it, because of the cost up front. And your land has to lend itself to it as far as slope and drainage goes. We can go to the next slide, and then we can actually show this is ours being built, so you can see how deep it is. And then we have the wood chips. The best way to do it was to unload them on the road and then push them down over the ditch. And I was running the skid loader when they took this picture, and boy, that was a thrill driving down the ditch with that to a big hole that was 10 foot deep. I was hoping it would stop, but fun times. It was really neat. We can go to the next one. We had quite a few people stop by and want to see what was happening, and I thought that was great. A lot of people had never seen one in the area, and I think there were a couple more that got built after ours once they saw them. So that was kind of neat for us. And you can go to the next one. That's just us putting the cover over it. We did not have to do a liner because our soils were a tight clay soil, so we didn't have to do a liner on the bottom side, but we did have to put a liner on top so we keep the wood chips clean. And they've been pulling samples. IDALS has been coming out. The first couple of years they came out on a real regular basis, and we're pulling samples. We never had a severe problem with nitrates. I think the highest we got was about 9 parts per million, so it was pretty low. But the water sample coming out on the bottom side would be about 3 parts per million. So it was taking out more than half the nitrates out of that water. This is an interesting farm because it gets hog manure, and we do have to put the hog manure on in the fall. So we use a stabilizer in the hog manure also, but we also put cover crops on to try to bind up that nitrogen. And it's been we've been really impressed with what that bioreactor can do, and how we're keeping through those practices on that farm, how we're keeping the nitrogen where it needs to be and used for the crops. So we can go to the next picture because this is what it looks like. Really exciting. It's a patch of grass. The two white stakes that you can see in the bigger picture, that is where we have our control gates to control the amount of flow that goes through. That's kind of, we don't mess with those a whole lot. We think they're set pretty well, and they're slowing down the water, giving the microbes enough time to work to get the nitrates out of the water. But yeah, not very much to see. You can drive by it. It's on 160th Street, Muscatine County. It's just a green patch of dirt or grass. That's all it is. And then we'll get to the summary, and I'm trying to leave enough time for questions. So in summary, a lot of these activities I have done on a voluntary deal. I have done some partnerships with IDOLS and with NCRS, or NRCS, sorry. Too many acronyms in my head. And I really think that the volunteer approach works well. There are a lot of people that are picking up. I think in the spring of the year, when you drive around the countryside, you see a lot of fields greening up early. It's not because they're poor farmers and there's weeds growing. It's because they actually planted those cover crops and they're doing what they're supposed to do. 10 years ago, you didn't see that. So I think we're seeing a lot of progress that way. I visit with a lot of people on strip till and the right placement of nutrients, and my peers are recognizing, hey, yeah, especially when you're in the farming economics right now are so poor, anything you can do to try to save some money and be more efficient, I think there's a great opportunity now for farmers to embrace these practices, because it is going to save them money. It's going to save them money on their fertilizer, and it's going to save them maybe money on seed because they can do a variable rate application. So those things are, a lot of new stuff coming down the pipe in agriculture. But I would say progress is being made. I think a great example, and I have it right at the bottom of this slide, is the Hewitt Creek watershed. Do some research on that and see what they were able to do up there in Northeast Iowa. But no, I forgot the name of the town up on Highway 30 or 20 up there. Dyersville, up around Dyersville area. It's a great story about what they've been doing through voluntary practices and stuff. And I guess at that point, I will leave it open to questions. Oh, the next slide, there's Trouble 1 and Trouble 2. That was taken a few years ago on Father's Day. It's kind of a fun day for Dad to go riding with the boys. So any questions? I'm ready. Cassie, you're muted still. Were there any?
Okay, let me scroll through here real quick. Thanks everyone for sticking with us. Sorry for the technical difficulties in the beginning. Okay, Kristen asked, can you compare the cost to plant cover crop versus tilling?
Ooh.
She said $25 an acre versus tilling.
Well, it's two different things. I mean, if you're going to do regular tillage practices instead of no-till, I've been out of that market for a while. It costs a lot to have the tillage equipment. I would say that a lot of guys would probably put $25 an acre, maybe $30 an acre into tillage, whether you count the tractor, the fuel, and the actual tillage equipment that you're pulling. So maybe cover crops not that much, but when you're looking at the economics right now, it's pretty tough to find that extra $25 in my case to find that seed so you're not really comparing apples to apples when you talk tillage and cover crop, because they're the exact opposite. It's kind of tough to put a value on the difference. Hope I answered that kind of.
Okay, Matthew asked, has a saturated buffer been considered? These are engineered and a contractor will dig a perpendicular trench to divert tile water into.
So when you talk a saturated buffer strip, I do not have one because they are very site specific to put in a saturated buffer. You have to have the proper elevations, the proper creek. I know where one is at. There is one located right outside of Walcott, and it's been a great success story on what they've been able to do. But that's the main downside to a saturated buffer, is you really have to have the right kind of land to lay that out. But they work very well when they're put in. Quote the exact numbers that we saw, but there is substantial savings, not savings, but substantial amount of nitrates that are cleaned out of the water before it goes into the creek.
All right, any other questions? You can type in the chat. We'll wait a minute or so to see if there's any other questions.
Gosh, that's it. I feel like, wow. Hopefully.
Oh, let's see.
I saw something pop up there.
And it also asked, have you considered tile water flow to determine load and fertilizer losses?
Have I? I have not. All I can tell you is on the testing, we had tested the creek before we put in that. Actually, it was designed by IDAL's engineer, that bioreactor and the flow and what would be coming through. That's about the best I can tell you on that.
All right, any other questions? I will mention, while we're waiting to see if there's any more questions, that Partners of Scott County Watersheds is planning a workshop, probably scheduled for the fall, when things are a little bit more back to normal. We're going to have different representatives from different organizations that have grants available for best management practices for urban and rural situations. So keep an eye on that, and it'll be a great way for you to explore different options for your property and ways that you can get some financial assistance. All right, well, if we don't have any more questions, I will go ahead and leave it at that. Thank you all so much for attending our forum today, and keep track of Partners of Scott County Watershed's website and social media for information on our next forum, as well as our next snapshot volunteer water monitoring event if you're interested in getting involved. And thank you, Rob, for a great presentation.
Thank you. Appreciate it.